They say loyalty doesn't pay, but I'd argue they've never seen it tested in the fire. Because real loyalty, not the kind you wear like a uniform, but the kind that lives in your bones, doesn't beg for recognition. It doesn't seek applause. It works in silence. It wakes up before dawn. It misses birthdays, sacrifices weekends, and carries burdens no one else sees. And when the system decides that this loyalty is now too expensive to keep, it doesn't die. It transforms. My name is Reed Callahan, and I gave 18 years to the sky. 18 years of flawless flight records. Zero accidents, zero delays. 18 years of mentoring young aviators, building a training program from nothing but trust, repetition, and grit. I watched cadets turn into captains. I taught them not just how to fly, but how to hold the weight of hundreds of lives in their hands and never tremble. And in 3 minutes, they erased all of it. They handed me a manila envelope, spoke about restructuring like it was a weather report, cold, impersonal, clinical. They didn't look me in the eye. They looked at the spreadsheet, a sheet that told them my value in numbers, not in the lives I saved, not in the crashes I prevented, not in the midnights I covered for pilots too tired to keep going, just numbers. And apparently I was no longer profitable. I didn't yell. I didn't rage. You learn not to flinch in a cockpit. You learn to absorb turbulence. But silence isn't surrender. I walked out that door, not broken, just awakened. And behind me in the halls of Altus Air were the very men and women I had trained. Pilots who carried my voice in their heads during rough landings, who heard me every time they adjusted the flaps, double-checked the gauges, or made the impossible seem routine. They saw what happened, and something inside them shifted too. It started as whispers. Then it spread like jet fuel on tarmac. One by one, they approached me, not out of pity, out of purpose, out of a fire they didn't know they had until that moment, out of the recognition that if this could happen to me, no one was safe. The spreadsheets wouldn't stop at me. The next cut might be them. Or worse, a corner cut in training might be the difference between turbulence and tragedy. So they stood, 30 pilots, 30 of the best in the business, men and women with thousands of hours in the sky, with families to feed, mortgages to pay, futures at risk, and they walked, not with signs or shouts, with dignity, with discipline, with the same calm they'd used to guide a crippled engine safely to landing. Altus Air didn't understand what it lost that day, but the sky did. Because when 30 trained aviators refuse to fly, people notice. When flights are canceled, when airports go silent, when passengers ask why, the world listens. And the company that built its name on safety suddenly had no one left to fly safely. They threatened. They postured. They tried to replace us with contractors who knew how to fly. Sure, but didn't know the culture. Didn't know the systems we had spent years refining. Didn't know the people. Didn't know the purpose. But what Altus forgot was this. Experience isn't just a line on a resume. It's what lets you land in zero visibility. It's what keeps you calm when alarms blare. It's what saves lives when systems fail. And you can't buy that in bulk. Victor Chen did. Skyward Global was growing fast, ambitious, hungry, but not stupid. Victor had been watching. He knew the value of seasoned aviators. And when he saw 30 of them walk out together, he didn't see rebellion. He saw a leadership team. He offered me a new beginning, not as just a pilot, as the director of flight operations. Total autonomy, build the program, set the standards, create the culture, no boardroom politics, no consultants who think Excel is more important than experience. I didn't say yes because I wanted revenge. I said yes because I wanted to build what Altus had forgotten. An airline where safety wasn't a slogan, it was a way of life, where pilots weren't disposable, where loyalty wasn't punished. 3 weeks later, I stood in a new training facility. 6 state-of-the-art simulators. Emergency drills so real, your heart would race like you were falling. Classrooms that didn't just teach procedures, but forge mindsets. And one by one, my crew arrived, civilian clothes, flight bags slung over shoulders, determined eyes. We weren't starting over. We were ascending. Altus tried to recover, tried to hire, tried to clean up the mess. But reputation is fragile. The FAA came knocking. Stock prices started diving. Boardrooms went silent. The CEO resigned. The managers who had smiled while gutting safety protocols suddenly found themselves looking for jobs in industries that didn't require honor. And the world saw. Because sometimes the strongest statement isn't a press release. It's a group of professionals walking away from a paycheck and toward a principle. This isn't just a story about pilots. It's about you. The artist told their vision no longer sells. The employee told they're too expensive. The teacher told their methods are outdated. The father who gets laid off at 50. The single mom whose sacrifice goes unseen. You're not invisible. You're the foundation. And sometimes being pushed out is the only way to find the runway you were always meant to build. I didn't seek power. I didn't plan a rebellion. I followed the same compass I taught my pilots to trust: integrity, precision, and courage. Because the truth is, no one can ground you if you were born to fly. And no one can erase a legacy that lives on in the people you've lifted. So the next time they tell you you're replaceable, too old, too slow, too expensive, remember this: they might own the company, but you built the sky. And if 30 people believe in you enough to leave everything behind, that's not mutiny. That's a movement. I don't quite remember how my legs carried me out of that building. Maybe because at that moment, I didn't feel like I was walking anymore. I was drifting, drifting through the years I had served, drifting through memories of every takeoff, every anxious trainee beside me in the cockpit, drifting through the belief that I was once irreplaceable until they replaced me with a spreadsheet. But the reason I didn't collapse under it all wasn't because I was stronger than anyone else. It was because I couldn't allow myself to drown in the bitterness of betrayal. I had trained those men and women. Every captain in that room had once sat across from me, nerves trembling, learning how to land an aircraft during a simulated engine failure at 3 a.m. And now not one of them hesitated. They stood up. Not for me, but for what's right. Right doesn't need applause. It just needs people who won't look away. I saw it in their eyes. The same young aviators who once doubted themselves, now staring down executives without blinking. They didn't threaten. They didn't shout. They simply refused. Refused to fly under unsafe conditions. Refused to stay quiet when maintenance logs were manipulated. Refused to be cogs in a machine driven by greed. I once believed I was just a discarded pilot, past his prime. But in that moment, I realized something else. I wasn't discarded. I was foundational. Not to a company, but to a philosophy. I remember what my old instructor told me decades ago. A pilot doesn't just fly planes. A pilot carries lives in their hands and sometimes carries the truth. They say legends are forged through sacrifice. But no one talks about how sacrifice often begins with injustice, with the quiet cruelty of people who treat human loyalty as an expense line. But what they can't quantify is honor. They cut training time. We trained in our own hours. They squeezed inspection windows. We inspected with instinct and experience. They saw safety as a hurdle. We saw it as an oath. That's the difference between those who work a job and those who live a code. I didn't ask for justice. I built it. When Victor Chen called from Skyward, I didn't see an opportunity. I saw a stage, not for revenge, but for resurrection. To prove a point they never saw coming, you cannot eliminate someone who is the standard. I wasn't out to make noise, but I refused to stay silent while they turned my sacrifice into a clearance item. I didn't speak up to be praised. I spoke up because silence had become a threat. And then they came, one by one, not in uniform, not on Altus payroll, but with belief, with free will. They chose to walk away, not because I asked them to, but because they remembered the man who once placed a hand on their shoulder and said, "You're good enough to fly, and you're brave enough to lead." We didn't take the market with flashy ads. We took back trust with discipline, with flight hours logged when no one was watching, with training sessions that no one tallied, with a mindset that couldn't be bought, only lived. That day, as I stood in the control tower and watched Skyward's first Dreamliner glide down the runway, I knew something no title could take away. No one could ever fire me again. Not because I had a new position, but because I had become a value so strong, the very people who let me go were now chasing what I'd built. 6 months. That's all it took. 6 months from the day I walked out of that office with nothing but a folded uniform and a silent farewell, to the day I stood watching my former employer spiral into the chaos they tried so hard to ignore. Altus Air had become a headline, but not the kind you celebrate. Hundreds of flights canceled, stock down 46%, CEO and ops director resign amid FAA investigation. The empire that prided itself on numbers was finally destroyed by the one metric they never understood: respect. You don't build trust with balance sheets. You don't build loyalty with buzzwords. You don't build legacy by cutting the very people who built you. But that's what they did. They cut too deep, too fast. And when the bleeding started, they acted surprised. As for us, Skyward was no longer the small player trying to compete. It was the new standard. Our training program, already recognized by industry leaders. Our pilots, the same 30 they let walk, now shaping safety protocols others were scrambling to copy. And me? Well, I was finally flying again. Not because they needed me to, but because I chose to. Because some things, some pieces of your soul, you don't retire from. You don't hang up legacy. You wear it like wings. I still remember that flight to Tokyo, the smell of jet fuel at 5 a.m., the way the runway lights danced under the wheels, the calm before takeoff. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about being home. Victor stood beside me on the tarmac as we watched Catherine's crew disembark after a flawless international landing. "They're sending someone to talk to you," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Altus," he clarified, "the new board chairman. They want you back." Of course they did, because when the plane is on fire, suddenly the pilot you ignored becomes the one person you'd beg to take control. "What are you going to tell them?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I looked out across the tarmac, where 30 former Altus pilots, now Skyward's elite, were laughing, exchanging checklists, and preparing for their next journey. Not just flight crews, family. "I'll tell them," I said slowly, "that I'm exactly where I belong. Because I wasn't built to salvage broken systems, I was built to build better ones. Let them rebuild with consultants. Let them juggle PR disasters. We were busy flying, higher, safer, stronger. You see, they thought they were burying me. But what they didn't realize was that I was a seed. You don't fire a man like that. You plant him. And when the ground cracks open and the roots tear through concrete, you remember that sometimes the quietest departures lead to the loudest returns. So to anyone out there who's ever been cast aside, dismissed, replaced, or told you were no longer valuable, don't fight for your seat at their table. Build your own damn runway and let them watch you take off. Because real power isn't in retaliation, it's in resurrection. And the best revenge is not vengeance at all, it's excellence.